Welcome to this ADF Insider Series session on building visually appealing Web 2.0 data dashboards. My name is Dana Singletary, and I'm a Principal Product Manager in the Oracle Application Development Tools team. In this session, I'll begin with an introduction of the Application Development Framework and how it's leveraged at Oracle. I'll then go into an overview of ADF data visualizations, followed by a rather detailed demonstration of building a Web 2.0 data dashboard. I'll also provide a demonstration illustrating the runtime functionality of some of the data visualization components, and then we'll take a look at what's coming in the future for ADF data visualizations. An old Chinese phrase is, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," and this is certainly never more true than it is today with the abundance of information that you see in applications. The key is, how do we reduce this information? How do we present it in a more pleasing, more appealing manner? Well, this is where data visualizations come into play. Oracle ADF is a common development framework that increases productivity and ease of use through visual and declarative development, taking care of all the plumbing code for you and implementing best practices. ADF promotes a service-oriented development paradigm with reusable business services and composite applications development. And it's also based on standards including Java EE, service-oriented architecture, as well as service data objects and component architecture. And it provides end-to-end coverage for the model view controller paradigm with security and customizations. ADF is Oracle's strategic framework for all of Oracle's next generation of web UIs, including Fusion application, middleware components that includes Enterprise Manager, SOA Suite, Business Intelligence, and Web Center, as well as vertical applications such as insurance, telecommunications, and pharmaceuticals, and then many other applications and products at Oracle. Anyone can use this, and it is available to customers and partners as part of the platform. What are some of the major benefits in utilizing Oracle ADF in your application development efforts? Well, first off, it's been proven that you will find 30% productivity improvement using Oracle ADF over .NET in creating your application. So what this means is 30% quicker time to market with your application. So faster and simpler standards-based development. You also have rich interactive user interfaces without the cost due to the fact that there are so many rich client components already available for you to use. Just simply drag and drop and use these components out of the box. You have a single set of developer skills regardless of what you're developing for, whether it be mobile, geographic information, or cubic data. Also, a common infrastructure with declarative customizations, end-to-end security as already mentioned, drag and drop data binding, reliable certification and support, and advanced tooling out of the box with JDeveloper. So as already mentioned, with ADF, we really don't care what your underlying data may be or what you're trying to integrate with. You create these business services once, representing your data, and then you can expose these business services to any interface that you desire, whether it be the web or a desktop application or even mobile-based applications. So create these business services once and reuse them many, many times. Now what I'd like to do is just quickly show you what Oracle's Fusion applications looks like. So this right here is an example of one component of Oracle Fusion applications. The next few slides here contains images from Oracle's Fusion applications. So in this first slide here, a couple of screenshots that includes data represented by bar graphs, funnel graphs, as well as a hierarchy viewer, and then some table data as well. And all of this data is enclosed in a panel box and then further a panel dashboard. So very indicative of some of the layout components and some of the data visualization components that you would utilize in building a Web 2.0 data dashboard. And some of the same type of information here. So once again, some bar graphs as well as tables of information and menus, but then you also see some additional layout artifacts such as panel tab components, and then over here on the right some slider components. But what's really interesting is that sales targets are represented in this data visualization component called a project Gantt chart. And then over here, a look at Oracle's Human Capital Management Talent Review. So once again, graph information that also is illustrating pop-up behavior. Let's take a look at the JDeveloper IDE. This is the unified visual development platform for Oracle Fusion applications. Now clearly this is not the way you're going to lay out your IDE, but all of these windows are dockable, so you can move them around and rearrange this however you choose. In the top left corner you have the Application Navigator for navigating the various artifacts of your application or creating new business services or new JSF pages or new business processes, for example. In the bottom left corner you have your Database Navigator with full integration to SQL Developer, so you can actually build your database right here within JDeveloper or model your database here within JDeveloper. You also have a number of extensions such as the SOA extension for your business processes and Web Center for your Web 2.0 artifacts, and then your visual editor for building your JSF page where you can get directly into the source if you choose to. You can look at the bindings to your business services or manipulate the bindings to your business services, as well as look at the history of the JSF page or even the Beeple process that you're working on. ADF faces rich client components. Well, here we have a component approach to page construction, visually and declaratively developing your application. And all of these components has the AJAX already baked into them. So you don't have to create this boilerplate component to get this asynchronous JavaScript and XML functionality. And as I've already mentioned, this is the standard UI or rich client components that are used for a lot of the things that go on at Oracle, including Oracle's Fusion applications, as well as Oracle's products such as Web Center, SOA, and Enterprise Manager. Let's take a closer look now at what this session is really all about, and that's ADF data visualization components and how they can be leveraged to build Web 2.0 data dashboards. These are rich, interactive Java Server Faces components that provide significant graphical and tabular capabilities for analyzing your data. There's a number of these data visualization components provided within Oracle's application development framework. You have graphs, such as the bar graph or pie chart, and you can add 3D animation or rollover behavior. There's a number of properties that can be manipulated here to give different functionality with these graphs. You also have gauges, geographic maps, as well as pivot tables for analyzing data on row and column edges. You have Gantt charts for project management, as well as the hierarchy viewer, which you saw earlier in Oracle's Fusion Applications Human Capital Management product. And then one of the newer components is the thematic map. Well, what are some of the common features that apply to all of these data visualization components? You have declarative development using simplified JSF tags. You also have design time creation using the data control palette or the JSF visual editor or property inspector, even the component palette. You also have live data preview at design time, as well as data binding access to any row set or tree data control. And then you have automatic choice of best rendering technology, whether it be Flash or PNG. So there's more than 50 types of data visualization components, including your pie, bar, line, bubble, funnel, and stock graphs. Very interactive with active data enabled, animation, selection, data highlighting, dynamic reference, interactive pie slices, master detail relationship, scrollable legend, time selector, zoom and scroll. You get the idea. There's a lot you can do with these graphs. And you also have spark charts. I'll now go into more detail on some of these data visualization components, starting with that of the gauge. The gauge component can be used to quickly track key performance indicators, and there's a number of available types here, including a dial gauge, a status meter, vertical status meter, an LED, which can be further broken down into an arrow, bulb, rectangle, or triangle gauge, all of these with animation and interactivity and custom graphic support. With the geographic map, you have the functionality of Oracle Spatial within ADF. You can view business data on a map, so you can imagine you have an inventory in a warehouse located somewhere in the United States. You can visualize that information right here on these geographic maps. You can format this by point, color, pie, or bar, and if enabled, you also have active data support. So once again, in the scenario of a warehouse, information is being updated on stock inventories on a hourly basis perhaps. Well, that could be reflected here in that geographic map. With the data visualization pivot table, you have multiple layers on row and column edges, as I mentioned earlier. Some of the supported features here include drag and drop pivoting, horizontal and vertical scrolling, cell, row, and column selection, as well as header and cell formatting. You have automatic totals and subtotals, data filtering, drilling, sorting, if enabled, cell editing, as well as stamping out of information for data bars and cells. And then you also have a pivot filter bar. The data visualization Gantt chart you saw earlier in one of the example screenshots of Oracle Fusion applications. These are used for tracking tasks and resources over time for project planning. There's three different types of Gantt charts here. There's the project Gantt chart for project management, scheduling Gantt chart for resource management, and then the resource utilization Gantt chart for resource utilization. We also saw the hierarchy viewer earlier in Human Capital Management product of Oracle Fusion applications. This is perfect for viewing hierarchical data, often used for organizational charts, for example. Some of the features here include multiple panel cards for details, multiple layouts, progressive disclosure of details, the ability to expand and collapse nodes, the ability to render simple ADF components inside of the nodes, as well as search functionality. And then we have the thematic map. This is one of the newer components, and some of the features here include base maps, custom regions, animation, drilling, selection, markers, and formatting with colors, gradients, and patterns. Now what I'd like to do is actually spend probably the next 15 to 20 minutes showing you how to build a Web 2.0 data dashboard leveraging some of these components that you've seen here. As you can see, I've already created an application workspace with a model and view controller project. And the model project is already configured with a number of view objects or view entities. And then the view controller project is also configured with images, but I actually need to create my JSF pages. So the first thing that I want to do is open up the ADFC config file, which is basically just the controller for navigation, and create a couple of views. The first view I'm going to create is called Products, and then I'll create one more view which I'll call Orders, and then I'll create a control flow case between these two views. First one from Products to Orders, and the action here will be Orders, and then in a similar fashion from Orders to Products, and I'll call this one Products. Now if I double select on Products, I can actually create this JSF page, and I'm going to create this as an XML document. I'll just go with a blank page. And now what I want to do is start working with some of the layout components to actually create the layout for this data dashboard that I'm going to build. First component that I want is the panel dashboard. So I'll just drag and drop this here. And then in the structure window, if I select form, I can just select the button and it'll create the button where I need it to. I can change the name of the button either in line right here or over in the property inspector, whichever I choose. And I'll change this name to products and set the button action to orders so that I will navigate from the products page to the orders page when I select this button. Now if I select the panel dashboard over in the structure window, I can actually go back to the property inspector and set the columns to 2, the row height to 350, and this is basically going to allow me to add the number of panel boxes to this that I want. I'll also set the inline style to a width of 1200 pixels and a height of 750 pixels. And you can see it updated in the view itself. So now if I just simply drag and drop a panel box, then I can right select on this and insert another panel box after it, or I could simply drag another one in. It's a number of ways that you can do the same thing within JDeveloper. And a third panel box. So the first panel box, I'm going to name it Product Prices. I can update it inline as I mentioned earlier or in the property inspector. If you want to update it inline, just simply select on it and start entering your text. The second panel box, I'm going to change the name here to Stock Level by Warehouse. And then the third one, I'll set it to Stock Level by Product. So now that I've got the layout, I can start binding my business services to my UI and creating some data visualization components. So I'll go to the data controls palette here and expand the data controls, and the one that I want to start working with is products one. So I'll simply drag and drop this onto my product prices, and I'm going to create a bar graph here. I'll use product name for my x-axis and then list price for my bars. And then of course I can swap these bars with the x-axis and set the current row for the master detail relationship. So in the structure panel, now what I want to do is select this bar graph and then select the DVT legend area, and then over in the property inspector I can set the scroll by to as needed. So can actually set scrolling on this if it is needed once we're running the application. Okay, so let's move on to the second panel box. And this is the stock level by warehouse. So I'm going to select the ADF data visualizations drop down from the component palette, and then I'm going to create a thematic map. Going with the USA states here, I can now go to the area layer, and then in the property inspector I can set the appearance on this, or the label display, to off. So now what I want to do is add a global point layer. So I'll do that, and then I can bind data and simply browse to the data control that I want to bind to this thematic map. And in this case I'll use the products data control, and then within that the relationship, the warehouse stock levels. Now I know I have longitude and latitude coordinates in my database, so I can set those accordingly. And then I can set the current row for the master detail relationship, and I am done. Okay, so let's expand the point data layer now, and let's select the marker and then edit this marker. Here I can set attributes such as the opacity, which I'll set to 100, as well as the XY coordinate scale, and I'll set both of these to 200. Then by selecting the Attributes Groups tab here, I can add to the grouping rules. And the rule that I want to add is a group by value on quantity on hand. I'll set the marker properties to color, and then for the legend level I will set that to stock level. I could also select one of the defaults if I chose to. Now if I expand the value specific rules, I can set certain exceptions here. So I'm going to create 3 exceptions, and what I'm entering here for the condition is just using EL, or the expression language, to bind to a quantity on hand. And I'm going to set this first one to less than 100, set the property to color, and then the property value to red. So for any products that have less than 100, it will show a quantity of red for that particular warehouse. And then for the legend label here, I'll set this to low. So I'm just going to paste this quantity on hand expression language that I put in the first one, change the value here to less than 500, change the property to a color, the property value to yellow, and then the legend label here to medium. So you get the idea. I'm going to do one more, and this is going to be greater than or equal to 500, and the property value will be set to green, and then of course the legend label will be set to high. So now, once I'm done with this, I can start creating bindings in my panel box 3. And then we'll move on to the orders JSF page. So in panel box 3 here, I want to create another bar graph, but this one's going to be a horizontal bar graph. Once again, illustrating a master detail relationship. And the relationship here will be using the products data control, then the warehouse stock level, and then the warehouse stock. So simply drag, drop this in here, select graph, and then select horizontal bar graph. For the x-axis, I'll set this to product name, and then for the bars, quantity on hand. And once again, like before, I'll swap these. And then OK. So as I did with the first bar graph in a panel box 1 up above, I want to set the legend area to scroll as needed in the property inspector. Okay, we're pretty much done with this page. We'll come back to it at the very end because I do want to add a couple of one operation on these panel boxes. But let's go ahead and create the orders page at this point. Once again, creating this as an XML document, I want to start working with some of the layout components. And the first layout component here is a panel splitter. And as you can see, it's by default horizontal. I want to change the orientation on this to vertical. And you have 2 facets here to work with, a first and a second facet. So in the first facet, I'm going to drop another panel splitter. And then, as I did in the first JSF page, if I select form, I can simply click on the button and it will place the button where I need it to. I'm going to change the name of this button to products, and then of course the action to navigate back to the products page. And then by selecting panel splitter 1, I can set the splitter position to 500 over in the property inspector. And I'll also set the inline style to correspond to what I set in the first page. So we'll set the width to 1200 pixels and the height to 750 pixels. Alright, let's select the second panel splitter and set the splitter orientation on it like we did with the first one. I'll set the splitter position here to 350. Once again, you can experiment with this. These are not necessarily random numbers. I've worked with this before and this seems to suit this type of layout for me. Alright, let's select the first facet here and then start binding data. So what I want to do is first drop a panel group layout in here, and then I can start dropping my data controls into this panel group layout. The first data control is the orders, and I'm going to create this as a read-only form. I'll delete the first attribute here, the order's ID, or rather the last one, the customer's ID. And then I'm going to include navigation controls. Now within orders 1, I've also got orders items, so I want to see the items that relates to an order that's selected. So I'm going to drop this in here as a ADF read-only table. I'll delete the first two attributes here, order ID and product ID. And then I can also move the pecking order of these attributes up such that they're visualized a different way at runtime. And this one I just moved the product name up one. Alright, let's go on to the second facet. And here I want to drop the person's data control in as a hierarchy, which is another data visualization component that we saw in the slides earlier. I'm going to move the phone number up, and I can delete the panel card. And then for the phone number, I'll set the component to ADF output text. Now what I can do is actually add an image to this hierarchy. So if I select the title area, I can then select to add an image to this and set the attribute to person ID. Now the reason I want to set this attribute to person ID is because I have images in my view controller project, and these images are numbered with a number that corresponds to a number in the database. And that number designates a specific person. So I selected orders here, and I'm actually just deleting a couple of items. And I'm almost done here. So I can select the image in the hierarchy viewer, and then in the property inspector I can actually set the source to my images folder, and I'll show you where this is here in a moment. But it's already got the binding that I need, but I just need to tell it where to find these images. So looking back at my view controller project, and in the images folder you see the images that correspond to a specific person. So now in the structure panel, if I select the hierarchy viewed, I can then select the node and then adjust the size of these specific cards in this hierarchy view. So I'll select the DVT node, the first one here, and I'm going to set the height on this one to 120. I'll leave the width the same. And then for the second one, I'm going to set the height here to 75 and the width on this one to 120. And this is for the order date and order total that you see here. Now on the hierarchy itself, I can set the inline style for the actual hierarchy component. So I'll do that and set the width to 100% and then the height to 500 pixels. Okay, so we're almost done at this point. Now working with the last facet here, I can create a pivot table. So I'll once again use the orders 1 data control and then the order stock level and drop this in as an ADF pivot table. I'm going to drop the product name on the left column here, and then for the data labels, above the data label I'll set this to warehouse name, below it I'll set it to quantity on hand. And then finish this. So if I select the pivot table now in the structure panel, I'll show you a neat way to add another data visualization component. So basically what I'm going to do is just comment out this output text on this component. I'm going to copy the expression language binding from the value here because I'll use that in this component that I'm getting ready to add. And then I can just simply type it in here. I could use drag and drop and show you how to do it that way, but we'll just add it in this way, and this is going to be a gauge component. So going back into design mode, you'll see that I now have the gauge here. But I can also change this gauge to something else, and so what I'm going to do is actually change it to a status meter. A couple more things. I would like to change the image format to PNG stamped. I'll copy the value in right here so that I actually bind to the data and it shows the correct data on this status meter. And now, last but not least, we'll set the inline style of this to a width of 50 pixels and a height of 10 pixels. Okay, over in the products page now, I indicated that I want to show you some runtime customization. So on these panel boxes, I will drag a component drag source operation onto each one of these. So going back to the ADF faces components within the component palette, I'll grab the component drag source and just simply drop it in the structure panel on the panel box. And then I'll follow suit and do this with the next two panel boxes as well. I can easily test my application out here by right-selecting on this JSF page and selecting Run from Context, and this starts at the integrated WebLogic server and deploys the application. So this is my products page, and you'll see that I have the three panel boxes: product prices, stock level by warehouse, and stock level by product. So I can scroll the various products that I have here, and as I scroll over the product prices, I can actually select any of these bars here, and it will show me warehouses to the right here that have quantities of these products. And I also get the exceptions where I set low points, mid points, and high points, as you can see. So that's showing master detail relationship between product prices and the stock level by warehouse, but likewise stock level by warehouse, which I can select any of these warehouses, and it shows me the stock level by product being updated here, which I can also scroll over that and get the quantities of those products in that warehouse. Here you're also seeing the runtime experience of dragging and dropping these components or these panel boxes because of that operation I added to them. Now we're navigating to the orders page, and you see the hierarchy viewer, the pivot table, the read-only form, as well as the read-only table. I can change the layout of the hierarchy viewer quite easily, scroll in and out on this hierarchy by using the controls here or by using the simple scroll button on my mouse. Other things that I can do is expand and collapse this, as you can see. And then I can also navigate through the various records that we have here and get other individuals that have orders that they've placed. And you'll also see down here in the bottom where the pivot table is updating because of the master detail relationship as I go through this. I can also change the reordering on these column row edges quite easily. And then here you also see where I've added the status meter gauge as opposed to the text that we got by default. So that's all there is to it. So let's go back to the slides, and I'll step through a few more of them and then show you another demo. There's actually an ADF Faces and DVT demo online. It's a complete component gallery and features demo for these components. You can view the page source directly from the demo, and you can also download the demo and open it up within JDeveloper, deploy it to your integrated server, and it's got the complete source code so you can actually explore the application and see how things are actually developed. You can find this demo and instructions on OTN's JDeveloper site under Sample Applications. So what I'd like to do now is just actually show you this online demo and step through a few of the components that we haven't had time to look at in more detail. This is the ADF Faces Rich Client demo accessible from OTN, and you can actually download it, as I mentioned, and run this within the integrated server. The basic URL that you want to remember right here. If you don't remember it, just Google ADF Faces Rich Client demo and you should find it quite easily. But what I want to do is show you some of the feature demos here, and specifically let's take a look at the graph drag and drop demo. You can experiment with a number of these, view the source, and so forth. I can actually drag Michelle, for example, from the employee performance over to the employee compensation. And then likewise in this other demo right here, I can drag various individuals from the bubble graph over to the table and then vice versa. Okay, let's take a look at the pivot filter bar now, and specifically the pivot filter bar with pivot table and graph. So you can pivot on row and column edges here, and you'll see as I manipulate the pivot table, the bar graph over to the right here is updated. So simply moving column and row data around resummarizes the pivot table and will of course update the graph for you. So definitely go in here and experiment with this some and some of the other pivot tables. The next one is, let's take another look at the thematic map. I know we used this one in the demo earlier, but just show you some of the other things that we didn't do with the thematic map. So let's take a look at animations, and then we'll take a look at drilling. So with animations, I can animate on an area or a data layer and then invoke this action right here. So you can set this actually to happen at runtime in an application such that, when you first launch this, it will cube to left or cube to right. Likewise on the data points. Alright, let's look at the thematic map functionality for drilling as well. So here this is quite simple. For example, if I double click on a state, Texas for example, it will drill into this and show me the counties within this state. Can also drill back out on it quite easily. Also you can use the mouse to drill out if you choose to. Okay, the last one that I want to show you is the geographic map. We didn't actually look at that in the demo earlier, and it's quite interesting. This one shows integration with Oracle Spatial within ADF. And we'll take a look at the map with legend here. So I can easily use the window here to move this around, focus on specific area of the map. I can also just select the map, drag it around, zoom in on it, and then I have the toolbar up here so I can do things such as find the distance between various warehouses, in this example right here between Chicago and Columbus using the ruler. You can also do things such as find the radius or square miles of an area by working with some of these other components here in the tool palette itself. And you'll see that it gives you the details down in the lower left corner. So definitely spend some time working with this, download it, and play with it in JDeveloper. What does the future hold for ADF data visualization components? Well, in the next release, you're going to see support for mobile platforms, touch and iOS support coming up. As you see in this example right here using an iPad, we actually demoed this at Oracle Open World this year with HTML5 rendering and interactivity and touch support on these devices. Some of the new components are the diagrammer, which is perfect for showing a network of nodes that can be arbitrarily linked together, or the tree map and sunburst components to display hierarchy using color and size of the nodes to convey information. And then there's the timeline component to visualize events on an interactive timeline. So as you can see from this session, there's a lot going on with ADF data visualization components now and in the future, and it's well worth your time to invest and explore these further and start using these to build your data dashboards. Don't forget the ADF runtime demo. You can get to it from this URL. You can also download the demo and load it up in JDeveloper and deploy it to your integrated server and work with it there. So you have full access to the source code. So to learn more on JDeveloper and ADF and how to build these dashboards, you can go to this URL here. You can download examples, tutorials, ask questions on the discussion forum. We have samples, as well as the developer guide to explore, and there's much more out here as well. And then further, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or on the JDeveloper PM blog. So hopefully this has been beneficial for you today, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.